Now, bringing up some more fearless ideas in TEDxUMaryland. Thank you all for staying for all of these empowering words. I'm about to bring up another one of UMaryland's own fine faculty, Dr. Kimberly Griffin. Kimberly A. Griffin is an associate professor at the University of Maryland. Prior to becoming a faculty member, she served as a higher education administrator and student affairs professional, working in undergraduate and graduate admissions, promoting diverse and hospitable learning environments, and new student orientation. These professional experiences have greatly informed her work as a scholar, and her research focuses on three core topics: the persistence and success of underserved students, diversity within the Black community, and mentoring and developmental relationships. Professor Griffin is a recognized scholar in the area of higher education access and equity research. She has published her work widely in multiple outlets and is frequently invited to speak at national meetings and conferences. She was a recipient of the 2013 Early Career Award from the Association for the Study of Higher Education and was identified as an emerging scholar by ACPA, College Student Educators International, in 2010. After completing her undergraduate work in psychology at Stanford University, Dr. Griffin received her master's degree from the University of Maryland. Her doctoral work in higher education and organizational change was completed at UCLA, West Side. Ladies and gentlemen, speaking fearlessly on her ideas on mentors through research, in practice, and on reality TV, Dr. Kimberly Griffin.
Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, you're a lively audience. How are you this afternoon? How are you? Good. I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to talking with you folks. So I've been a professor for about 7 years, and before that, I was a student for more years than I care to count. As I've spent so much time in school or teaching school, I think my family and my friends have some really interesting ideas about how I spend my leisure time. So I imagine they think that I read the works of ancient philosophers or the New York Times, and surely I don't watch television. And if I do, then I watch the History Channel or National Geographic, something really thoughtful and intellectual. But I have a little bit of a confession that I'd like to share with you all today. In my free time, I really like to watch TV. And the TV I like to watch are the shows that display the complete and utter nonsense that we engage in as human beings. And while I'm not going to display all my dirty laundry here on the stage today, I'll tell you that one of my favorite categories of shows are competition shows. So I like any show where a person who's cultivated a talent over a long period of time gets to display that talent and people get to judge who the next big thing is going to be. So I loved America's Next Top Model and Chopped and Top Chef, yes, right? And The Voice, all those shows. Watch them for hours. But my very favorite of all time is Project Runway. And interestingly enough, I see another one out there. Interestingly enough, Project Runway is where a lot of my interest in mentoring was really developed. So, Project Runway, for those of you who don't know, is about fashion. And it was appointment television in my home, particularly when I was in graduate school. So I'd sit down and watch it every week. And I loved everything about this show. I loved the angsty contestants and the snarky judges. I loved the crazy competitions. But my very favorite thing every single week was Tim Gunn. So Tim wasn't a contestant and he wasn't a judge, but he was there every week. So he would show up at the beginning of the show and he would give out the instructions on what the task was going to be. And then he would come by the workroom while all the designers were working on their projects. And if he found somebody who had hit a particular stroke of inspiration, he would look at it and he would rave about it and talk about how wonderful it was and urge them to keep moving forward. And then if he came by a designer that was struggling a little bit, they hadn't really put together as much as they wanted, or their work was a little bit of a hot mess, he would use his signature catch line. He would tell them to make it work. And in my humble opinion, I think Tim was at his very best at the end of the show. When a designer gets sent home, they would come back to the workroom and they'd be feeling sad and maybe a little bit shabby about what they had done. And sometimes they were crying a little bit or a lot. And Tim would open up his arms and give them a big hug and remind them of how wonderful they were and all the things that they would go on to do, and that they were going to have a great career beyond this one moment, even if they had made some mistakes. So in that moment, I loved Tim Gunn. I thought he was amazing. And it took me a while, though, to realize that he actually had a formal title on the show. He was the designer's mentor. And all of a sudden, it made sense to me why I loved him so much and why I appreciated him so much. I was in the middle of doing a dissertation on mentoring. I was studying faculty and students and how they interacted on college and university campuses. And so much of what I saw Tim doing really resonated with what I thought good mentorship was. But at the same time, as I watched him every week, I started having questions and started wondering what exactly it was that Tim was doing. So the first thing that I noticed was that not everybody loved Tim the way that I loved Tim. Some of the contestants just wanted him to go away after they got the instructions from him. Some of the contestants would mutter angrily under their breath after he gave their feedback. He'd be just like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. They just wanted him to go away. So I started wondering whether everybody wants a mentor. Does everybody need one? And even if they say that they do, did they want whatever Tim was offering? Did they want whatever support that he was trying to provide? Now, the second thing I noticed was when I was busy watching my other competition shows, I noticed that, for example, Tyra Banks on America's Next Top Model, she met with her contestants too. She would meet with the models and she would give them feedback, but she was very precise. She would actually tell them how to fix what was wrong, and that wasn't what Tim did. And then when I watched Top Chef and I watched Tom Colicchio, he would go in and see all the chefs in the kitchen and he would ask them questions and they would give answers and he would just raise his eyebrows at them. He didn't really necessarily give them much feedback, and if they asked him a question, he was really aloof and sometimes he just walked away. What was all that about? Were these people mentors too? And if they were mentors, if they considered themselves that way, what made them act in a way that was so different from what Tim Gunn was doing with the designers on Project Runway? In essence, I really started wondering what mentoring was and what mentoring wasn't, and how we really bring about the best outcomes in the people that we want to help. So today, I hope I can share with you a few things that I've learned about mentoring from research, from my own experiences, and yes, a little bit from reality TV. One of my favorite things about being a faculty member is that I get to solve problems. I get to think about big ideas. And one of the ideas that I kept coming across over and over again is that while people talk about mentoring as being really transformational and really important, there's this one group of people who really value mentorship. There's another group of people who talk about their mentoring relationships in really dissatisfying ways. Mentors talk about their mentees not being responsive, that they don't follow the advice that they give, and mentees say that their mentors aren't available, they don't provide the support that they wanted, and they just don't feel that connection that they wanted to feel with them. And ultimately, I think that this disconnect comes down to three things that we do over and over again in these relationships. So the first, I think that we use the word mentoring an awful lot, but we're not very clear about what that actually means. So I'm an education researcher, and if you look at the literature in my field, you can see that there is tons and tons of work that basically suggests that mentoring brings all things good, right? So students, if you interact with a faculty member, if you say that you have a mentor, your learning will be better, you're more likely to stay in school, you'll have higher degree aspirations, you're more likely to go to graduate school. Like, all these good things are connected to mentoring. But there's one big problem with this research. Unfortunately, everybody's defining mentoring in really different ways. So Marianne Jacoby actually reviewed all of this research, and she found that there was at least 15 different definitions of what mentoring actually was, and that some of these definitions were actually in conflict with each other. So I started wondering, is this a big deal? Like, does it matter that we define mentoring differently? And in some ways, no, but in some ways, it actually is a big deal. I think it reflects the fact that as individuals, we define mentoring really differently. And when we have a definition, we have an expectation. Right? So if I define a mentor as somebody who cares about my personal life and wants to know about how I'm doing, wants to sit down and have coffee with me, and my mentor defines a mentor as somebody who helps me with career advice and maybe helps me network and introduces me to people in his or her field, then we're going to have a little bit of a problem. We're going to have differences in expectations there. But we never talk about these things. I think because the term mentoring is so familiar, we rarely sit down and actually articulate what our expectations are. We also talk about mentoring like it's a behavior, like it's something that you do. When in fact, I think of mentoring actually as a relationship that's composed of lots of different types of behaviors. So I really encourage all of you to think about what kind of support you need, what things you want to take place within your relationships, and focus on getting that, rather than a person that will accept a particular label. So the second thing that I see us doing in our mentoring relationships is looking for one person who can meet all our needs, right? So we've taken the time to figure out what we need. How can I find this one person who's going to step up and fulfill everything that I need? And I know that I totally did this, particularly when I was a graduate student and I was thinking about becoming a faculty member. And I was really overwhelmed, and I was scared of all of these different responsibilities I was going to have. And I remember sitting down thinking like, oh, I really wish I had a mentor who could help me think through my research ideas and teach me to write grant proposals. And I guess I'm going to be a teacher, so I need to think about how to be a teacher and a facilitator in the classroom. And if they could answer my questions about what committees I should say yes to and no to, that would be really helpful. And I want them to know me personally, so I would love it if they had dinner with like me and my mom when she comes to town. And I have to go on all these job talks, and it'd be helpful if that person could help me figure out what's the best outfit to wear. These are a lot of things to expect of one person. I'm exhausted just making this list. And I can only imagine what one of my faculty members would have said if I would have come into their office and asked them to do all of these things for me. And even if they would have agreed, I can only imagine how long it would have been before they were blocking my phone calls and ignoring my emails because I was doing way too much, that I was a complete wear-out, right? So I think it's important to kind of break out of this idea that we're going to have one super mentor, right? That we're going to have one person who's going to swoop into our lives and fix everything. And surely if we have this one person, we're going to be the successes that we want to be. Instead of thinking of a super mentor, I think you should think of a Justice League, right? Not just a person. Who are your people? Who's your team? What group of folks do you want to bring together to support you? So while I was a graduate student and totally enamored with everything that Tim Gunn did, and I really appreciated his validation, and I know I would have valued that in my life, I probably also needed a Tom Colicchio who gave me a little bit of tough love and pushed me to do my best work. And I probably also needed a Tyra Banks who could coach me and help me hone my craft, and maybe she'd help me pick out the right shoes to go with my job talk outfit. So the final thing that I think that we often do is that we focus so much attention on the mentee that we forget about the mentor. We forget to think about whether or not the mentor stands to gain anything in their relationships. And I think in some ways this is normal and natural, right? Like we form mentoring relationships because we want to help the junior person. We want to help develop someone into who they ultimately could be. But in the process of doing this, I think us mentees get a little mentee-centric, right? We start thinking a lot about me. Me, 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 me. Help me. Spend your time with me. How can you support me? Who are you going to introduce me to? What resources do you have to give to me? Right? That's a lot for one person to take on, and we forget that mentors actually stand to gain a lot from their relationships as well, that they can get a lot of satisfaction, they can get a lot of fulfillment from engaging with their mentees, but the trick is they don't get the same amount of fulfillment or the same amount of enjoyment from everybody that they work with. And research suggests that they get the most fulfillment from the folks who think of their relationships as reciprocal, from mentees who are actually engaged, who ask good questions, who are present, who ask about the mentor and want to be engaged in their lives. So in essence, mentors are fine with students who think about me, but they also want people who think about we and believe in reciprocity. So think about not only what you get from your mentors, but what you potentially have to give. In closing, I would say that I think that mentoring can be an amazingly transformational experience. It's something I really believe in. And it provides us this opportunity for a unique kind of human connection. We get to take a glimpse at ourselves in a different way. So for mentors, we get to see a version of ourselves that might have been long past. And for our mentees, we get to see a glimpse of who we might want to be sometime in the future. And I hope that a few of the things that I've shared today can help you cultivate these relationships and really get access to them in a different way. The first thing that I hope you all will remember is to not think about mentoring like it's a behavior. Think about it like a relationship. Get clear on the types of support that you'd like to gain access to and ask for them, and realize that what you want might be very, very different from what your friends or other people in your lives might want. The second thing is, don't look for super mentor. Cultivate your Justice League. Find your people. Find your team. And the final thing is that while you're focusing on me, don't forget about we. It's totally fine to think about what you're getting from your mentoring relationships, but also make sure to think about what you give. Thank you so much.